Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I, Mehrun Nisa, an MPhil scholar at CPPG, welcome you all to the second day of the International Conference on Navigating Future Trends and Transformative Pathways for Pakistan. Our agenda for today is bilateral relations and internal resilience. And this panel will be focusing on Pakistan India relations, pathways beyond deterrence, exploring themes of deterrence dynamics and post 2025 strategic environment pathways for fostering deterrence, resurrecting dialogue, and strategic stability in South Asia. Now, to introduce our keynote speaker for the session, Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, joining us online, is a seasoned Pakistani diplomat who served as Foreign Secretary of Pakistan from 2013 to 2017 and later as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States. A career Foreign Service officer, he has over 3 decades of experience in bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, including key roles at United Nations and as ambassador to the Netherlands. He is also the author of Pakistan-India Relations, Fractured Past and Uncertain Future. His work has focused on international relations, disarmament, and regional diplomacy, particularly Pakistan's relations with major global powers and neighboring countries. After retiring from active diplomatic service, he has contributed to policy discourse as Director General of the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, and as an author on foreign policy and global affairs. Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, you are warmly welcome to this session. Moving on to our esteemed panel, our first panelist for today is Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal is a political scientist and policy analyst specializing in international relations, strategic studies, and nuclear politics. He is currently serving as acting vice chancellor at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, along with being a professor at the School of Politics and International Relations, where he focuses on South Asian security, non-proliferation, and foreign policy. He holds a PhD in international relations and has been widely engaged in academic research, policy advisory, and teaching. His work often examines nuclear deterrence, arms control, and evolving security dynamics in the region. He also contributes regularly to the national and international discourse through publications, media commentary, and participation in policy forums. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, we are honored to have you here with us. Our second panelist joining us online is Sir Jean-Luc Racine. He is a political scientist and leading expert on South Asia, particularly India and Pakistan. He is a senior research fellow at the French National Center for Scientific Research and is affiliated with the Center for South Asian and Himalayan Studies in Paris. His work focuses on nationalism, urbanization, political dynamics, and nuclear issues in the region. Over the years, he has authored and edited numerous books and academic publications, contributing significantly to the European scholarship on the South Asian politics and strategic affairs. Mr. Jean-Luc Racine, thank you for taking time out of your schedule for us this session.
Pleasure.
Now, to introduce our discussant for today's panel, Ms. Sam Dada is a prominent Pakistani business leader, social activist, and the founder of Crossing Barrier, a think tank dedicated to economic and social innovation. Currently serving as the convener for national economic policies and reforms at the FPCCI, she has built a distinguished career as the managing director of Abid Ali and Associates and a former president of the Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Lahore. A vocal advocate for gender-based inclusivity and financial empowerment, she has advised the Ministry of Human Rights and received the Outstanding Women Leadership Award for her efforts in bridging the gap between corporate policy and social development. Ms. Sam Dada, a very warm welcome to our institute. Now, to start off our session, I'll hand over the mic to invite Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry for the keynote session. Thank you. Over to you, Ambassador.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Public Policy and Government in the HE College. It would have been my pleasure to be there in person but for my commitments here in Islamabad, I could not join you, for which I express my deep apologies. The subject of Pakistan-India relations pathways beyond deterrence is indeed important, topical, and relevant for not only practitioners, but also for those of us who are engaged in public discourse on this matter. Post 2025, geostrategic environment of South Asia has undergone a major change. Three main changes I would like to identify. Firstly, it is now well established that Pakistan can defend itself against Indian aggression despite conventional asymmetry, and the myth of India's conventional dominance has now been shattered. Secondly, India has discovered that its false narrative of associating Pakistan with terrorism has finally been blunted, as no country in the world endorsed Indian allegations against Pakistan on the Pahalgam terrorist incident. Thirdly, India's ambition to act as a regional hegemon or net security provider for South Asia has also been now challenged by Pakistan as well as other South Asian nations. Has India learned these three lessons? It appears that it has not. One, it has suspended Indus Waters Treaty, threatening the lives and livelihood of millions of Pakistanis. In a way, its aggression is continuing by other means. Two, Indian leadership is also continuing with its hostile anti-Pakistan rhetoric. This hate agenda has been perpetuated by Indian media, as well as dozens of anti-Pakistan movies being churned out by Bollywood. So, if we wish to explore the pathways beyond deterrence, it appears that we might have to wait till the Modi government reviews its policy of complete disconnect with Pakistan. Meanwhile, any unilateral concessions or gestures by Pakistan are not likely to be reciprocated by India. Two examples. Pakistan's release of captured pilot in 2019 and opening up of Kartarpur corridor were neither appreciated nor reciprocated by India. It is also important not to forget the larger dynamic in India. The BJP government's true agenda is to revive Hindu glory and pursue the RSS dream of creating a Hindutva-led Hindu Rashtra or Hindu state. And Pakistan has no place in this dream or vision. Therefore, anti-Pakistan rhetoric is not likely to cease anytime soon. We saw it clearly even during the recent peacemaking process that Pakistan was heralding to bring an end to the war between Iran and the United States. Indian External Affairs Minister called it dalali, which is a negative term for middleman, rather than appreciating peacemaking, which is the finest form of diplomacy. So let me raise a question or two here. Will there be another round of confrontation between India and Pakistan in the coming years? I recently sat through a number of webinars and seminars some of them run by American think tanks where Indians and Pakistanis were also present. And the views mostly expressed by Indian and other analysts indicate to me that another misadventure by India cannot be ruled out, though not immediately. Firstly, and there are reasons for that. Firstly, India has not only, it has not paused, it has not ended the Operation Sindoor, has only paused it. And in the meanwhile, it is continuing this operation through its proxies, namely BLA and TTP, via Afghanistan. At the same time, Indian state operatives have been found to be undertaking target killings in Pakistan. At some point in time, when Indian armed forces feel more ready and confident for the next round of confrontation, resumption of Operation Sindoor cannot be ruled out. Pakistani armed forces have therefore no choice but to keep themselves prepared to meet any surprise act of aggression by India. Secondly, closer to general elections in India in 2019, the BJP could create or use an incident to whip up anti-Pakistan, anti-Muslim sentiment to fetch more votes. And I'm saying so based on the observation of the past at least two major elections as well as state elections in India, where anti-Pakistan rhetoric peaked closer to the dates of election. If that happens in 2029, any miscalculation at that time could provoke a kinetic confrontation. Thirdly, if India disrupts or diverts Pakistani share of waters from the three rivers allocated to Pakistan under the Indus Waters Treaty, which India has suspended for the last 1 year or so, this could also instigate a major crisis because Pakistan has declared that any disruption or diversion of Pakistani waters would be deemed as an act of war. Some analysts have felt that the next round of confrontation might be harder to contain and it might be difficult for any third party like the United States to mediate. Recently, there was a big article in Foreign Affairs exactly on this theme. It is true that Indian attempts to expand space for conventional confrontation below the nuclear overhang is a dangerous and high-risk strategy. Any miscalculation could unleash unimaginable destruction upon South Asia. It is therefore important that the two countries should engage in some confidence-building measures to avert the risk of miscalculation. The real challenge, in my view, is that for 10 years now, Indian ruling party has disconnected with Pakistan completely, not even sports links. Instead, it has systematically inculcated hatred for Pakistan amongst the people of India, as I have indicated, through social media, electronic media, as well as Bollywood movies. This total disconnect is extremely dangerous as it creates an environment where misunderstandings and misinterpretations thrive. You would recall the 2022 misfiring of BrahMos, which is a supersonic missile, which can be a nuclear tipped missile, it landed in Pakistan. One can imagine if Pakistan had not shown the restraint that it did, what could have happened? Being neighbors, the reaction time is so little that both countries could virtually destroy each other if a war of this kind erupts. There are no bilateral mechanisms in place to lower the tensions or contain the crisis. The only mechanism available is Director General's military operations, who talk to each other on a weekly basis, but they normally confine themselves only to routine communications. There is therefore a need to reimagine the brinkmanship in South Asian security construct. Ideally, therefore, the two countries should incrementally resume bilateral contacts, at least the back channel, to lower the possibility of both sides engaging in another armed conflict. Some confidence building measures are fortunately continuing, and there are some agreements too, like 1988 agreement, 2005, 2007 agreement. Somehow they are being respected. Yet this is not enough. A more robust engagement is required at experts level, such as the one that had worked on conventional and nuclear CBMs. The two should also consider opening up bilateral trade and people-to-people contacts, because that also dissipates tensions and increases understanding. But the Indian government has decided not to even allow people-to-people contacts or bilateral trade either. The point is that if these two countries cannot be friendly with each other, at least they should find some method of peaceful coexistence. They both owe it to their people. Pakistan has never shunned normalization of relations, including trade and people-to-people contacts, because it knows that a peaceful relationship based on mutual respect is the only way forward for a tranquil and stable South Asia. Whether the Indian government is ready to accept that its 10-year-long policy to seek diplomatic isolation of Pakistan has failed, and that it must now review its hostile policy towards its neighbors, not just Pakistan. This is a critical question that only the Modi government can answer. I have deliberately omitted large segments of my statement because I want to give more time to other speakers and listen to them and to allow for question and answer. But if you allow, I will be happy to share the full written text of my statement with you. Thank you so much for your attention, and back to you, the moderator.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, for your remarks. Now I'll hand over to.
Oh, since Ambassador Azaz has to leave us, so we would want the question answer session for particularly for Ambassador Azaz to begin now. So people in the audience who have questions for him, okay, Haseeb, you go first. Introduce yourself and then ask your question.
My name is Mohammed Hasib, and I'm a PhD student at Center for Public Policy and Governance. So my question is that there's a widely quoted thing that is quoted in academia that India holds some sort of cold start doctrine, where it can engage Pakistan. It cannot engage Pakistan to an extent where it threatens its nuclear threshold. So, is there any such doctrine that India is following? And if yes, that can India fully block Pakistani waters, given the fact that it could become the next nuclear potential nuclear flashpoint? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Cold Start doctrine was invoked in 2003 when India felt that it would be able to mount a surprise attack against Pakistan, mostly at the places where Pakistan is most vulnerable in the middle. And before Pakistan is able to mobilize its armed forces, it would have achieved some, taken over some territory or damaged Pakistan. And in pursuance of this cold start doctrine, which was later renamed as proactive strategy, India mobilized and put in to advanced positions most of its formations. Later, when Pakistan was able to develop its tactical nuclear weapons, or we sometimes call them short range missiles, then the cold start doctrine was no longer able to be effective. As far as Indus Waters Treaty is concerned, I think there is no legal provision in the treaty for any party to unilaterally suspend it. We have consulted various legal experts, and the only way is to implement this treaty for the two countries to sit together and discuss if they need to review any provision of this treaty, because it was signed in 1960 and a lot of water has flown under the bridge, and therefore some changes can always be expected. But this can only be done if the two countries are ready to sit. But amidst the rhetoric like Mr. Modi's water and blood cannot flow in the same direction, or that we will not allow even a single drop of Satluj River to go to Pakistan, this hysterical approach to water sharing has led India to suspend the treaty last year in response to Pahalgam attack, for which there was no evidence at all, even 1 year later, of Pakistani involvement. So Pakistan's National Security Committee had already announced that if India disrupts or diverts these waters, this would be deemed in Pakistan as an act of war. And if that happens, God forbid, there could be a very serious confrontation with massive fallout for people of both countries. So India would be well advised not to go in that direction. Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience? Ji, sir, please.
Sir Azaz, yesterday I received a message from one of our students, and the message is about India is preparing to unveil two new joint doctrines. And the one is intelligence surveillance, reconnaissance, and the other is a targeting. And the targeting doctrine is aiming at enabling faster decision making during conflict and enhancing battlefield dominance. What do you think about these two doctrines? At the same time, I'm interested to learn what measures we are taking to counter their narratives, anti-Pakistan narratives. Uh, for instance, you yourself mentioned that they have produced around 9 movies, films to portray Pakistan as an enemy. So, what do you think? What Pakistan is doing in this regard?
There are two levels to answer this question. One is the operational readiness. Both sides, the armed forces of both countries, are engaged in plugging the loopholes, the gaps. As you know, Pakistan was able to surprise Indian side during the May 2025 confrontation by its integrated multi-domain attack involving missiles and drones and electronic warfare as well as cyber warfare. And Indian side had discovered that there were gaps in their operational strategy. So obviously, the Indian side is now working hard on that. And since the Israelis claim to be quite adept in intelligence surveillance, I think some kind of Indo-Israeli nexus is already there in this field. But also, as you know, in the last confrontation, Israeli drones Hirop were used against Pakistan. So both sides are preparing, and I am very positive that Indians would be ready to plug those gaps, and therefore our side will also need to continue working hard to make sure that if a confrontation erupts, Pakistan's side should be able to prevail. But I want to strike a note of caution here. Our purpose is not to enter into an arms race with India. India is a much larger country with a much larger economy and a 10 times bigger military spending and budget. So Pakistan is not into conventional symmetry. It will remain a conventional asymmetry. So Pakistan will have to find, unique ways. And luckily, missiles and drones have become great equalizers. As you must have seen in the Iran-US war, where the US, the largest military machine of the world, and Israel, the largest regional military machine, unleashed for 37 days their ammunition on Iran. But Iranian missiles and drones were enough to give them a tough fight. And therefore, I think in the modern warfare, and incidentally, I'm writing my next article on the future wars, this will be very, very different from the previous ones. And I'm very confident, based on some briefings that I have received, Pakistan is also preparing well, not for aggression, but to counter aggression. We will remain in a defensive mode, but we will not go down without fighting. And I think that's very important for India to realize, that they are playing with fire. There is no reaction time between the two countries. And if, they fired BrahMos missiles, which are supersonic, at 9 non-military sites in Pakistan, can you imagine? There was literally no reaction time. And these missiles can even be nuclear tipped. So you can imagine the kind of dangerous environment in which two countries are living. And that is why I've said that there should be some kind of back channel between the two countries so that this temperature comes down. Indians are reluctant to accept third-party mediation. As you know, they even did not want to credit President Trump of the United States, and they kept denying that he had a role. Frankly, it was hilarious because it was India which had requested the United States. And the proof is that the announcement came from the US president himself first, endorsed by Pakistan, and then endorsed by Indian Foreign Secretary. So I think India somehow is living in a delusion that it can dominate South Asian neighbors and still act as a net security provider. It cannot. And India's global profile will also not be attained until it carries all the regional countries along. So prepare for the worst, but stay open for dialogue, for confidence building, and for people to people and other interactions. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from the audience.
I can't hear you. Sorry. Can you go to the mic somewhere on the desk somewhere?
Sir, as you have claimed that India is a huge potential neighbor in terms of economy and military, then don't you think so, sir? Why we are confronting with India? Why not to come into a composite dialogue? As historically we have seen that India, we have different issues with India in terms of our issue, border issue, water issue, and other type of issues with India. So instead of dealing all of these issues differently, why not to come into a composite dialogue with India and to discuss all of these on one platform, sir?
This is what was attempted in 1997 when the composite dialogue was started. Unfortunately, it got disrupted at the time of Kargil crisis. It was revived in 2004, January 2004, and it worked for good 4 years until 2008, when India halted the composite dialogue. It was revived again in 2011, but discontinued in 2013. And ever since, the two countries have had no opportunity to discuss any issue under the rubric of composite dialogue. Now, composite dialogue was a good framework, I agree with you, because it had 8 segments, and practically every area of concern to both countries, both India and Pakistan, were right there. And there were 8 segments in which these were being issued, and progress was also being made, considerable progress. And I have given a full detail of all the work that was accomplished in the last 2 chapters of my book. I'm sure this book is available in the library of the college. So I would say that this is an unexceptional argument. Pakistan is open to resuming this dialogue. It is India which has halted that, because India believes that it is the bigger power and it should be able to dominate and subjugate Pakistan into accepting this reality that India is the most dominant power and sort of, the regional hegemon. This is, of course, not acceptable to Pakistan. On top of it, India has also taken several steps which are not allowing any further progress. One, it is changing the ground realities in the Indian occupied Kashmir by playing with the demography and electoral rules there. It is also, sort of projecting itself to form what is called Akhand Bharat. And there is a map in the mural map in the new parliament building in New Delhi, which was inaugurated in 2023, which shows India from Afghanistan and Tajikistan to all the way Myanmar. All countries are subsumed. And every now and then we hear India's defense minister that we will take over Sindh or some other part of Pakistan. And therefore, this whole philosophy of not accepting Pakistan's existence is something which is very deeply troubling. And yet, Pakistan remains open to dialogue. But of course, we will not go and accept Indian hegemony at the expense of our honor and dignity. Thank you.
Excellency Ambassador Zaz Ahmed Chaudhry Sahab, would have loved to have you in person, but thank you very much sparing time from your busy schedule to be available on Zoom. And uh, thanks to you too for a very comprehensive talk and enlightening us with all the points in the future that has to be taken. The students here have absorbed all these things, and many would be researching on the issues that you have raised. Thank you very much. We will look for another opportunity to welcome you to the CPPG and FC College. You are no strangers over here. I know that, and the book is also available in numbers over here. Thank you very much.
General Noel, I want to also thank you in particular because the letter that invited me bore your signatures. And I'm very, very pleased that you allowed me this opportunity. I feel ashamed that if a busy person like Vice Chancellor of Qaeda University can be there in person and I am not there in person, that is not a matter of pride for me. I should have been there. My own think tank, Snowber Institute, is doing an event at 12 o'clock on Markai Haq at the International Islamic University, Islamabad. If it was not my own think tank, I would have certainly foregone that and I would have gone over because your word, General Noel, is of great weightage to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please join me in giving a big hand for Ambassador.
God bless you. Allah bless you all. Allah bless our country, Pakistan. And my apologies to fellow panelists. I had to, I was so constrained, but I appreciate Aisha for your flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would hand over to Ms. Sam to carry on the panel further.
Thank you. First of all, I'm extremely thankful to Dr. Noel and faculty of EPSI College, our esteemed panelists, and the whole community for having me over here. I will not waste time because all of us really want to hear the views of Professor Jaspal. He has a lot of expertise, not only about the geopolitical shift and the geoeconomic things, but also the whole shift of the way Pakistan, India, they both have nuclear weapons. And we would like to understand this thing that how this strategic competition will go further and what will it affect not only on us but also to the rest of the world. Professor, I would like to ask you about. I will start with this thing about your book, The India Surgical Strike Stratagem. And in that, you mentioned very clearly that it provides a critical Pakistani perspective on India's shift towards preemptive strikes. When we talk about preemptive measures, the way investors said rightly about CBM and so many other things like track two diplomacy and so many other ways where we can not only talk person to person at the cultural events, maybe the different types of the like Kartarpur corridor, but since there is a lot of misinformation, there is a lot of trust deficit, how we will go for that as well. And last, I will ask you that please mention that in this current situation, how it can affect geoeconomically Pakistan stage role in the region as a regional player, because right now we are playing not only as a regional player but also from the economics perspective, as that is very important for us as well.
Let me start thanking Jana Noel and Sam Dada. Both I know since long, and also Alat for nice hosting, and Aisha for continuously pushing me to be here. And it's a great honor. The most important thing here is for me that I'm a former now. So, and I was telling them that my academic career, of course, I had a 13 years before studying in Sadhguru School, but my academic career started because I started looking as looking academics as a career, as a learning, So that's why I say that it's a big achievement. Second important thing is that when you come to your own institution, it's always because I stayed in the Newton Hall for 2 years and very fast and very nostalgic. I didn't inform my class fellows who are here, and definitely when they learn, there will be a big issue. And why I didn't inform because I wanted to be not, you can say, as class fellows always thinks that you are not always scared, but they respect and love. But having said now, coming towards your question, it's just a very important thing. You have to keep in mind when we look about the, and General Noel will agree with me, there is a big transformation in the international politics. We have seen 3 decades or more than 3 decades when there was more focus on state or and focus on the state versus non-state actors. In the 90s, it was benign when we were talking about economic, end of history, just picking up clash of civilization or a tragedy of the great powers. But in 1990s, our region was the same trade, same thing. And from the dawn of the first 21st century, there is again a big transformation that the same characteristics at the world level, more geoeconomics terminologies were dominating. But here people miss it. Everyone thinks that geoeconomics is too much benign. No. When Lutwak coined this term, if I'm not wrong, he was using it economics as a weapon for a coercion. But anyway, we were moving in the 21st century, and here came war on terror. But war on terror did not change our fate, as the end of the Cold War did not change, and we were nuclearized. And same, war on terror did not change, and as a result, during the war on terror, we had a number of the, you can say, incidents like 2001, two military eyeball to eyeball deployments. Then we have a 2008. Before that, Kargil, and then you have a uh, what we call it 2016, 2019, and ultimately 2025. Why I'm saying this? Because today, where we are sitting here in 2026, it's complete change. If you see how in a two-liner I explain the world politics, I say state on state wars have once again revisited state on state, whether it's a Europe, whether it's a Middle East, whether it's a South Asia, whether it's a Southeast Asia, though there are some terms of the peace there, whether it's a Western Hemisphere. So different characters, but the same thing. The second important thing, which you have to not ignore, that predatory style of states' foreign and strategic policy. Greenland is mine. Strait of Hormuz, I have to control. I will isolate. So that is there. And this is and third important dimension is changing character of the warfare. This is the biggest shift we are now facing. And it's just a normal when I was a student and then again when I am teaching strategic thought. So there is a combination of three things: strategic environment, cool-minded thinking, and technology. So the biggest challenge for us is technology is fast running. Even in the 1990s, in the military studies, when we talk about revolution in military affairs, uh, That was part of, but now it's a galloping kind of a thing. I still recall in 1990, in 2018 at Beijing Xinjiang Forum, I was a speaker, and there were 8 other from the NATO and every country. The question was, is artificial intelligence is going to bring a revolution in military affairs or not? My point, or even I still agree with it, it, it is a enabling technology. It only make it faster. You can call it revolution, but character will be different. But now it's everything. Today, aircraft carriers are not a force multiplier, but they are just like in our history, elephants of Raja Porus. I can just give you two examples in the recent. In 22 April 2025, when this Pahalgam India false flag, India, first thing which India did, India had two weapons on which it was, or three weapons on which it was very confident, very confident. One weapon was proxies, because they had bought the an hour failure of the Afghanistan strategy. And they sent, if you just go the archives, 70 terrorists were killed by our forces in one valley while coming from Afghanistan. Second, Blue Water Navy. We have a defensive navy, very small. They have a blue water navy, and on that they have a great investment. Americans and India signed Malabar Naval Exercise in 1992, and from 1994 continuously, and then the Japanese joined, and many other states. And then in 2009, at Shangri-La Dialogue, Robert Gates openly said India is a net security provider in the Indian Ocean. Before that, Quad basis was laid down in 2007, and then there was in 2013, Manmohan Singh, a prime minister, said one statement, net security provider, but didn't work. And when Modi came in 2014, entire situation changed. Because we have to take into account, if you are a student, definitely you are using the word three level of analysis. You have to conduct the all three levels, individual level, Modi personality, state system, and international system. So Modi is a product of, he's a Parak Charak, only a few in the RSS. And it's based on the conceptualization of Plato's, what we call it, guardian kings. No family, no property. Even Vajpayee was like that. But anyway, I'm going different. But focusing on my this, so when he came into power in '82, BJP had 2 seats. '90s, they had a number of the seats. And then what was they selling? Victimhood theory, that we have to get a centuries, 100 years, 1,000 years revenge. And that is the slogan, which is Hindutva, gelling, politics. That's why, as Raz was saying, no CBMs. How he shake hand with us when he has to get a vote? And politicians always go for a vote. Their constituency matters. Primary, because if they have a constituency, then they are prime ministers, otherwise they are nothing. Same as Amit Shah, same as Rajanath, that is the problem. So anyway, when we reached to this Modi era, he started talking about India is a net security provider, is a naval strategy, and within that naval strategy, he came up, instead of using Indian Ocean, India's Ocean, and endorsed by the United States. Quad on the Eastern Indian Ocean and I2U2 in the Western Indian Ocean. And you are seeing this I2U2 mini security group, India, Israel, UAE, and what we call the United States. So where were other 36 littoral states? Nowhere. We are a big littoral state, fifth biggest state of the world, population-wise, nuclear power, but no. You are a littoral state of the Indian Ocean. But they were saying, no, India's ocean. This was a term coined, and this was very much acceptable. So their naval power. But what happened in the April, their aircraft carrier moved out, and when he saw the reaction of the Pakistani Navy, it moved back. So that was the second psychological achievement, that how character of the war was changing. It's the same like big aircraft air carriers were coming from the US in the Iranian war and then going back. So that was, I think, different. Now the third tier, Indians had a superior air force. They have a very strong superior air force, but lacking the training, lacking whatever could be. They have a Rafales, modern Rafales, and this was a case. I wrote a book on surgical strike stratagem, brinksmanship, and response. I was started working in 2017, but then the strikes happened. It was published in the print and now second edition. I was just judging how their media spin, how they look it. But the point which I wanted to say, in 2019, Moody said, if we had a Rafales, we did not have this kind of a humiliation on 27th February 2009 when they were aircraft were shot, kept. So, and it's a very interesting debate. There was a scandal going on, and it's on record. Rahul Gandhi, while criticizing this Rafale deal, because Modi was selling himself as a chowkidar, and he said, "Chowkidar chor hai." Just see Indian newspaper, right there. So Rafales were there. And that was 27th, 7th, 6th, 7th night when they strike. Where they strike? Mosques, madrasas, civilian households. And in a retaliation, I think this was a maturity of the armed forces that they, in a true sense, follow the just war theory and make a distinction between the combatant and non-combatant, only strike those jets, and 7 were down. And I'm still confused because Trump says 11 or 12. And this is a issue is when I discussed this thing, sir, with the Air Force people, they said that we were hitting their jets and keeping the record that when it was strike, when its wreckage was gone down, full fill. If there was a disruption, whatever could happen, we did not count. So if you are hitting 4 Rafale, Su-1, MiG, then these mirages shall be just like if they themselves call it flying coffins. So, but anyway, that their Air Force knocked out and it moved from the forward bases to the back. Now comes the third. And the third was they moved with the ground forces. And from the LOC, I've seen that their Nowshera brigade and everything was smashed completely up to Srinagar, Pakistan. And that was the time when India horizontally they were escalating, when they vertically escalated. That was when using the BrahMos missile, which is a cruise missile, and they're working on cruise hypersonic missiles. So no one knows. And where it hit, Noor Khan. In a missiles, who are working on the missiles, we normally look at probability of error in every missile. That 0.1%, 0.2% from the target hitting. If there could be a 2 to 3%, 0.22 or 0.012% error, where it was going? It was going towards the GHQ or your Joint National Command Authority, 500 meter on or even lesser in a crow flight. So it was, and that was at 26 targets were hit. And then they rushed to the United States. So big shift was India, which say it is not interested in the mediation, it requested the mediator. The good news is that this time when they approached the mediator, it was the same mediator which was, you can say, convinced it's a great power, which was supportive to its move. I can say it was an encouraging ally of the India before the war. Just see the documents. What was the statement of J.D. Vance? He said Pakistan shall assist India in eliminating the terrorist sanctuaries on its soil. What is this? We were saying that we have been fighting, and even 3 months before or 2 months before, we handed them a most wanted terrorist. And President Trump made his in his first State of the Union address that claim. But what was his vice president? This was a mindset. This means that the narrative of India was very powerful. But immediately when the Trump said, I am the mediator, they approached me, that's and then comes what we call it cyber and all these things. But the most important domain where India had a big advantage, that was the media. Why? If you see, BBC is making India's documentary. They have what we call it programs like talk shows. Why? Media go with the after the advertisements. Whosoever give advertisement to the media, you will have their story, their inclination. So media is not a neutral. Please forget about this neutrality. In social sciences, neither I am neutral, nor General Saab, nor she, nor you. It's a reality. But we try to express ourselves. So media is not a neutral. Indian media has been exposed in a manner that no one is today trusting the Indian media. Before that, we were struggling that they have a what call it Eurolab, blah blah, and this media, Indian media, started having a linguistic, holistic narrative since the rise of the movement or Hindutva. And within there, if you see, today we all like the movies, but today when you see the Indian movies, you cannot accept it. So Indian media has been checkmated, and there was a maturity from the Pakistani. So these are the reality. I'm not as a Pakistani claiming that these things happen. So now coming towards this thing, what happened? So before the 2025, India was in a political, diplomatic, media, military advantageous situation. But 4 days war exposed in a manner it has no, I cannot say disadvantage, but it's a balance of power established. And especially balance of power established at the conventional level. With the change of the character of the war, now when the balance of power has established at the conventional level, there is another shift. It is a still we Pakistanis are struggling to accept this reality because we are tuned in saying that there is no space for war in a nuclearized environment. And now we have established ourselves advertently or inadvertently that there is a space for war conventionally. 4 days we had a conventional intensive war. You used every kind of the weapon, starting from a small drones to the cruise missiles. Though we did not, but it was a part of the war. So it means there is a space for conventional war, whether my people like it or not, because we are always fond of listening again and again the same voice which I was making. So it's a big shift. I was writing. If you see my books, my writing, I'm saying the same that there is no space for war. But now I'm saying, sitting here, that there is a space for war. So adjusting, there is a big challenge. So there is a but very risky. Now here, when I coming towards this space for war, there is a problem is in which environment we are. As I say, state on state wars, character of the war has changed, and there is a fourth nuclear age. If you Google, I wrote and published during in March my monograph by Jinnah Institute, fourth nuclear age, but we normally look at things from the Western perspective. But this is the fourth nuclear age where the trends for the or the contours of the fourth nuclear age, they are not in the West. They are in the, you can say, East or in the developing world. The first contour jumping from third nuclear age to the fourth nuclear age is symmetrical warfare between India and Pakistan. Two nuclear armed states had an intensive air combat and missiles or all these kind of the things. That was what we call it 7th to 10th May. And second contour of it is asymmetrical warfare between Iran and US plus Israel. So these two wars will be going to, you can determine the future course of action on the strategic chessboard. So that is the way when we look about. So there was a symmetrical warfare. Still, we have a capabilities to fight the symmetrical warfare between India and Pakistan. But India realized that it's not working. So it went for not even a asymmetrical, it can't go for asymmetrical, neither Pakistan can go because we are somewhere there is a balance of power and balance of terror, and we are a nuclear power. So they went for subconventional. They were alleging us that we use the proxies, but they went for Afghanistan and they are using the proxies. So Operation Sindoor is there, but in a different character. Now here is the point comes why that's why we say there is a risk. There's a complete deadlock. As Lars very rightly pointed out, since 1 decade we have no contact. Of course, today we are celebrating that India has been isolated. We are not isolated, but these are just. But reality is that we are moving on the other side. Yes, India's new normal, or what we call it, Moody Doctrine. I came up with this. Dr. Rabia published a book, reimagining the conventional militarization. I published a chapter, and I found now this myth has gone. The nuclear will provide you absolute deterrence. No, you need to work at all levels. So nuclear is one in between conventional, then subconventional. And in that context, you have, if you're talking about deterrence stability, you have to work at all levels. So deterrence cannot be hit at the nuclear, but where you go when you are hitting at the lower level. We are today bled more in the KPK in Afghanistan, economically, politically, everything. So my point here is, so we have to reconstruct the conceptualization of the deterrence as well. There are technological optimist deterrence, like AI gives you a strengthened deterrence. There are technological pessimist deterrence thought that it can undermine the deterrence. So it means that you have to move ahead. Now, within this context, when you look about the economics, your last question was, the geoeconomics will be now same. Once again, we are, as I said, predatory style of the politics. Of course, all wars have some political objectives. What is politics? Who gets what, when, and how? So economics is always sometimes shining, sometimes cause, sometimes even in a messianic wars, even in a crusade or Islamic jihad, economics is there. So these wars will be going to determine how the economics, but the issue is in if you go CPPG yearbook, I think last year there was data 10 times increase in the jump in the defense budgets. So it means that these are the realities. Now, here is a big shift which we have to keep in mind. Final my word. We have seen that normally in the nuclear age, nuclear threat has been used by conventionally weaker nuclear power. That if you hit me, it escalates to nuclear, there will be exchange of nuclear. That was our rhetoric in 2002. But today I'm seeing Putin is, what is nuclear saber rattling? Always. Trump is doing nuclear saber rattling. Modi is doing nuclear saber rattling. Even Israel did a nuclear saber rattling during the Gaza. So that's a big shift. So it means that even in nuclear, conventionally advantageous states, they are not confident like India. So by this way, I can conclude here. Then you have a question answer that, of course, there was a symmetrical war. There is no space for asymmetrical warfare, but there is a space for conventional warfare. And that is a different way because in November, when there was attack in Delhi, according to new normal or Modi doctrine, there must be strikes on Pakistan. But India refrained. Why? Because they are using the Afghanistan. Second important thing in this context is that this victimhood theory of India, which will be the main cause, that will be not going to change the mindset of the ruling elite in India. Yes, people are saying they won the what we call it Bangladesh election. I mean West Bengal by the BJP. State elections have different dynamics. National elections have a different dynamics. You have to take into account. And finally, in this context, I think that, of course, as I've also highlighted, that the suspension of the treaty and these kind of the things. My point here is that in this current phase of the international and regional politics, you will have to be prepared. United Nations, good, because we don't have that kind of, but multilateral institutions are losing their significance and the realist paradigm is dominating. So when we go with the realist paradigm approaches, and when the leaders or the states are talking out their foreign strategic policies under the influence of the realists, then there will be a more anarchy in the international society. And if there is more anarchy, it's then Hobson world. And as in a Hobson world, which I learned here in the FC college, what is that Hobson world? Because my teacher was teaching me the social contract, and I had to. That's why I'm using. So, by this way, in that world, a state which has a military muscle strong, that state is going to. You can survive economically, politically, diplomatically. If you don't have a military muscle strong, maybe it seems very wrong saying for a professor you cannot expect like this kind of a hard recommendation. Then in these coming days, I think these all theories, geoeconomics or cultural, or you can say international political economy, they are becoming all part of academic discourse, but lesser impact in the decision making. Thank you very much. Can go to your.
So it was wonderful hearing everything from you, and I was sure that in one flow you know, you can guide us about not only politically but also from the economic perspective. Now I will move forward. To Mr. Jean-Luc. I'm audible to you. We have been talking about Pakistan and India relations, not only from the war perspective, but also we want to achieve some kind of the mutual ground where we can talk on dialogue as well, and where we can talk as not only the nuclear powers, but also from the trade and other aspects as well. I would like to ask you that you have been writing a lot about Kashmir issue, and before we will not address the conflict between both countries, we cannot achieve any kind of conclusion. So, having said that, you have been talking about, and you have write a lot about. You have been writing about Kashmir issue. You have been writing about the cultural backgrounds, and the one statement which was very interesting, that Pakistan's strategic paradigm expecting and expressing the complexities of the religious factor. So, from this, I would like to ask you, how do you see Pakistan at the international platform, from not only from the religious perspective, but also from the conflict and the peace and conflict resolution perspective? To you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. And thank you for inviting me to this conference. of course, what I shall present would be, in a way, a kind of outsider position, which is not necessarily a very comfortable position considering the context and the dominant discourse from both sides of the border. But what I'll say is the result of, well, quite a long practice of research on and in the two countries, but also it's fed by daily reading of respected newspaper from India and from Pakistan. And I must say that even if, of course, we see in the media strong nationalism from both sides, but fortunately, all the media are not the equivalent of the worst. And so we can pick up both information from both the sides, as well as, and this is of course particularly interesting, analysis from the two countries. So, of course, when we look at the definition of the goal of this session on the Pakistan-Indian relation, we can only approve of the goal which is presented to us about, I shall not talk much about fostering deterrence, but more about resulting dialogue and strategic stability in South Asia. But before that, I would like to come back to what happened since the conflict of May 2025. What is really striking is this conflict, at least seen from outside, is that there was a very strong information war. And the information war, the battle of narratives, was of course much longer than the open conflict. And this battle of narrative is still going on. As you know, having listened carefully to what has been said by the distinguished speaker before, the view is not shared by the Indian side. It's not a surprise, but here each side is a self-proclaimed winner. And that's true as well for the Trump mediation, which is acknowledged by Pakistan, and I would say more than acknowledged, because I really do believe that the opening of Donald Trump to Pakistan, and particularly to Chief Marshal Munir, was largely due to the fact that not only did Pakistan accepted the statement of Trump saying, I have mediated, but also praised the US president and claimed that he really deserved a Nobel Prize. And of course, when you know a bit of Trump psychology, this is something which was certainly very dear to him. But of course, the Trump mediation is denied by India. And here the discourse is quite different. When the Indian side is saying, well, it's the Pakistani GMO who call us. So for the outsider, observer, well, have no element to decide who is true, who is not. And I think it's something which is not astonishing, of course, in a time of conflict, and particularly when open conflict is only a stage in a long history of mistrust. This being said, what was striking as well is the new Pakistani vocabulary. And here, particularly as far as the TTP is concerned. Pakistan shifts from TTP to Fitna al-Kawarji in July 2024. And then after the May 2025 conflict, it has become Indian-sponsored Fitna al-Kawarij. And just as Fitna al-Hindustan for the BLA. I'm not sure that the international community is totally accepting this kind of definition. There is a kind of inversion about blaming the other side, whatever. What's striking also, and it's something which has emerged from various comments, including in the Indian media or Indian analysis, is that there was a ceasefire, a pause for the Indian authorities, that it has been underlined before, but no agreement and no dialogue. So I would like, in a second step, 1 year after Markai Haq for sticking to a Pakistani vocabulary, or 1 year after Operation Sindoor to cross the border, I'm looking at some assessment coming from the two countries. As far as Pakistan is concerned, and of course, this conference happened 1 year after the conflict, which means that we had a large lot of comments on the anniversary of the conflict. Pakistani PM Shehbaz Sharif on 9th of May this year was talking about crushing defeat inflicted upon India, a new chapter on Indian-Pakistan relation, and the old analysis, strategic stability in South Asia would remain a distant dream without the resolution of Kashmir issue. The problem, of course, is that the Kashmir issue is not resolved for decades. On the military command side, it was interesting to see two types of statement, in fact. The two types emanating from Field Marshal Munir, on May 10th, addressing a ceremony at the GHQ, Marshal Munir warned, our enemy should know that if any attempt is made in the future to carry on a misadventure against Pakistan, then the impact of war will not be limited, but extremely widespread, dangerous, far-reaching, and painful. Okay. When we listen to the ASPR statement, it's more on this tonality, if I may say so. But at the Corps Commander Conference on May 5th this year, the same Field Marshal Munir emphasized the importance of restraint and avoidance of escalation, advocating stability, supporting effort aimed at preventing further deterioration of the situation. That's a quote. So it's pretty interesting to see that the discourse may shift, and here it's not a question of audience, because in both cases, Marshal Munir was talking to his colleague. On the side of non-government comment, we have quite a number of analyses saying, well, we have won, but means It could be a long war. We can celebrate Pakistan victory, but between defense needs and the necessity of poverty alleviation, it's a quote. If Pakistan can find a balance between these two musts and move ahead, it can make a justifiable claim to be a winner. That was from Abbas Nasir in Dawn in May 24th. And sticking to Dawn, but Khurram Hussain this time on May 7th, the government has scored well on the diplomatic and defense front over the past 1 year, but the successes cannot mask its failure on the economic front. And without that, everything else is a passing spectacle. If I turn briefly to Indian statement of analysis, well, of course, from the official side, no real surprise. Narendra Modi's statement on May 7th, Operation Sindoor reflected India's firm response against terrorism and unwavering commitment to safeguarding national security, etc., etc. The military comments, and here we come back to what was the result of a strike by both sides. It was said this morning that there were 4 or 5 Rafale shot down, and I'm not speaking as a Frenchman because it's Rafale. It's not necessarily the analysis coming from US intelligence, for instance. But on the other side, the Indian military underlying that India, and they say Indian victory, was able to bomb deep inside Pakistan, and particularly, of course, the Mir Khan Air Base near Pindi. What's interesting, and it confirms something which has been said by the precedent speakers, that the Indian side is really analyzing and building up military capability in the new domain. This is their formulation. And they do agree that warfare has changed nature, and so India will now press more than before on hybrid threat, information dominance, and operation across cyberspace, electromagnetic, and connecting domain. This being said, you have also some Indian commentators, including sometimes former military men, who are more moderate on the extent of the Indian success, to quote Indian authorities. There was a retired colonel from the Indian Army, Alok Ashtana. Beware, because there are 2 Ashtana, and the other Ashtana is not on the same line. Who said if Operation Sindoor produced a winner, it was not India. And what's interesting here is that some experts explain why at the beginning of the conflict, the Indian plane, how many we don't know exactly, have been shot down. It's probably because there was an intelligence failure on the range of the PL-15 missile used on the J-10C Chinese fighters. And that may explain they thought that the range was 150 kilometers, and in fact the range was 200 kilometers. In any case, the Congress Party has stated that Pakistan has not been isolated, but for the Congress, Pakistan remained defined as the world leading sponsor of cross-border terrorism, quote unquote. And Beyond that, there is also remarks also by a former military, Uday Bashkar, who has been a commodore in the Indian Navy long ago, but who is now very much in the think tank circuit. He published an analysis saying decisive triumph of hard power for India, but question over soft power, stating that foreign audience have received the Indian narrative on Pahalgam terror massacres with, I quote, a mix of ambivalence and skepticism. This being said, I turn to a third point, trying to learn some lessons from the past. If we want to move a bit further on one of the goals of this seminar, which is resurrecting the dialogue. Let's remember in the 1990s, so of course 1998, both countries conduct nuclear tests. And soon after, there was contact between the two countries. And as you may remember, in February 1999, Indian PM Atal Bihari Vajpayee has this bus trip to Lahore. He visited the Minar in Pakistan and wrote on the visitor book, "A stable, secure, and prosperous Pakistan is in Indian interest. Let no one in Pakistan be in doubt. India sincerely wishes Pakistan well." This was in February. In July, there was Kargil. No comment. But nevertheless, Musharraf was invited to Agra in 2001, but it was not enough for settling really a strong dialogue. Then we must never forget, when we think about India, beyond what may be said about Modi, Hindutva, and all that, the very big trauma of 2008 Mumbai attack, with clearly terrorists coming from Pakistan. And at that time, you remember that there was no military reaction from the Manmohan Singh government. Now, which is a bit forgotten sometime, when we turn to Modi arriving in power in 2014, Modi at that time seems to borrow a bit from Vajpayee. He invited Nawaz Sharif to his inauguration on May 26. Nawaz Sharif, and he was not necessarily supported by everyone in the establishment, said, "Okay, I shall come." The army was unhappy. But the Lashkar-e-Taiba attacked the Indian consulate in Herat 3 days before Modi inauguration. They did not prevent Modi for visiting Nawaz Sharif in Lahore for his birthday in December 2015, 25th December 2015. But here again, on January 2, there was the attack on Pathankot Air Base, probably by Jaish-e-Mohammed. And the same year, 2016, the attack on the Uri army base with 17 killing. So, seen from the Indian side, and sometimes not only the Indian side, there was for years the impression that some actors were decided to oppose any attempt to dialogue by striking at India in Kashmir or not only in Kashmir. And this is something which I think should not be forgotten. Besides what could be said about the Hindutva perspective. And this explains, for a part, what Indian diplomat Vivek Kajju said last year after the conflict. Modi's Pakistan policy shifted at the very beginning from a search for amity to enmity. Now, the fourth point, if I'm not too long, tell me, the case for dialogue and the case for peace. On the Pakistani side, there is, of course, the recognition of the war rogues in India, that's a quote, unwilling to turn the page and make peace, but, and comments on the Indus Water Treaty. On the Indus Water Treaty, we must remember that India has pleaded with Pakistan for a long time, several years before 2025, for revising the treaty, which was found to be a bit detrimental to Indian interest. But there was no dialogue on the treaty even before the conflict. In an editorial in Dawn on 6 May, rationality demands that both states come to the table and discuss their grievance and their solution in a mature manner. Easier said than done. But there is also in the Pakistani comments some willingness to fight hate for building the case for peace. And hate on the two sides. I think about a piece by a scholar from Quaid Azam University, saying that, of course, the Modi regime and the militant Hindu right have created massive troll armies to fan hate, a lot of it against Pakistan, quote unquote, but also that for a generation of youth, young people in Pakistan have been bred on militaristic ideology that depict India and the arc enemy. So all this is, of course, quotes. On the Indian side, there were, or there was, or there is, discrete contacts by India and Pakistan peace movement, the Sufragia Action Peace Network, Pakistan-India Forum for Peace and Democracy, which may involve Indian personalities such as Manishankar Iyer or Radha Kumar. Even in Bollywood, you have some voice who have been against the narrative of the type of Durandar film. Is it really relevant? As sometimes we hear, I think it's never totally irrelevant, even if, of course, it's difficult to go beyond that. But here, what's interesting is what happened 3 days ago when the RSS General Secretary Dattatreya Osabale giving an interview to Press Trust of India, where he said, I quote, "The security and self-respect of a country have to be protected, and the government of the day should take care of it." No surprise. But at the same time, quote again, we need not close the doors. We should always be ready to engage them being the Pakistani, in a dialogue. And for this leader of the RSS, the civil society has a key role to play in the dialogue process. So, of course, it's a bit surprising, but it deserves attention. We can note, for instance, that General Naravane, the former army chief, approved this kind of call for dialogue with Pakistan. So, well, let's see if this RSS statement will bring something new or not. I shall just go quickly, but I think we cannot forget that on the larger horizon beyond the Pakistan-India relationship. With Afghan parameter first. With the Pakistani ambassador to the UN, who was previously the ambassador in Paris, he said that Pakistan has provided, I quote, irrefutable evidence of Indian collusion with terrorist groups that are engaging in orchestrating violent attacks against Pakistan. I must say, and perhaps I'm not well informed, but it's not really evident for international community. And this is why the Indian sponsor Fitna al-Kawarji, well, it may entertain something in Pakistan, but I'm not sure that it has a strong echo outside. And as far as China is concerned, well, now it's known and it has been noted evidently in India that there was a Chinese technical support to Pakistan during the conflict. But at the same time, the India-China II remained sustained. After the May conflict, India and China signed a line of actual control patrolling agreement in October 2025 between Ladakh and Aksai Chin. The same month of October, Modi and Xi Jinping met in Kazan at the BRICS summit, and the two sides decided to improve their relationship for economic reasons also. And as far as the Iran war and Pakistan mediation is concerned, here on Indian comments, you find in the media or in the think tank network the recognition that Pakistan has made a mark there. I think about a piece by Sanjay Dubey, India from non-aligned to sideline, or a piece in Frontline of Left magazine, The Joke is on Us. But I think everyone should remain circumspect when I think what Mohammed Amir Rana underlined on early May on Pakistan persisting security challenge, which is, according to him, not India, but more from Afghanistan. So, of course, to decide that India is beyond the TTP is a way to squeeze the problem, if I may say so. Because there is a kind, for an outsider, a kind of symmetry when Pakistan accused India to say, well, Kashmir trouble is an internal matter, why to accuse us? There is a symmetry with the trouble with terrorism within KP and saying, well, it's not just KP, it's India which is behind. So this kind of symmetry for the external observer deserve attention, but it's difficult to go beyond that. So I shall conclude on 2 points. First, India is not isolated. As you know, Delhi has signed a number of FTA agreements in recent years, but also after the conflict with Pakistan. And in many cases, the strategic partnership which has been signed eventually aside the free trade agreement include also defense issues. Modi will soon be conduct a tour in Northern Europe, and defense is on the agenda in Norway, in Netherlands, just as India has recently signed agreement with South Korea and Vietnam with a chapter on defense. The final point is about, in a way, the results of this narrative war. Depicting the neighbor as an enemy is good for strengthening nationalism as a tool for legitimacy, but of course, it does not always facilitate dialogue. And there is a risk and that besides the readiness for dialogue, which is articulated by the Pakistani side and which is requested by some non-government Indian, the risk, of course, in the war of narrative is that each side is becoming prisoner of its own rhetoric. That's why it's important to stick to the agenda of this conference and try a pathway beyond deterrence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was the perfect way that we could understand from the both sides. And the way you said that the dialogue should stay open, not only from the academic perspective, from the think tank perspective, for the betterment and for the future agreement in the region as well. Thank you very much, Professor Yuan, and thank you very much, Professor Jaspal. And the way you said, sir, that the balance of power at the conventional level is mandatory and it is need of the hour. So, stage is open for the question answer session. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, sir. I have a question for you, Dr. Jean-Luc Racine. Okay, am I audible?
Yes, it's all right.
Yes, okay. So my question is a purely social science question, actually, regarding nature of conflict or the changing nature of conflict between Pakistan and India, because what we observed last year was with the drones flying over highly populated urban areas, that the nature of the conflict has changed from traditional enemies, perhaps, to those of maybe neighborhood enemies. And because you have written about the proximity of the conflict between the two countries, I was wondering if you could shed some light that do you feel that the conflict has now changed more into a human security element with the preservation of, say, the infrastructure, the human psychology, because it became more real. I mean, I'm not saying that the conflict never has been real, but it became more real with the use of social media, with the proximity of it being more physically real over urban centers. So I just wanted to ask that, have we taken it out of purely military context and now placed it within a social context as well?
Yes.
Maybe I'm not placing asking the question properly, but
No, I guess that
yeah.
I see your point.
You can have a couple of questions and then you can answer.
I have a question for Dr. Jaspal. So it was a great presentation. Thank you very much. It's always very enlightening to hear you. I have. I want you to comment on one thing and then answer a question, sir. So when you are talking about, and maybe also it's an extension of what Dr. Rabe also asked. Um, so when we are looking at the Indo-Pak conflict that happened, and the way it happened. Am I to Are we to believe now that the region is entering into a technology-driven warfare rather than a traditional nuclear deterrence? This is one thing, and I would like to also know your comments, because your comments would also tell me what Islamabad is thinking now. On the other hand, sir, I would like to know that both the countries, big nuclear powers, and big countries within the region, and we have lots of issues and lots of challenges as far as the region is concerned. And I'm talking about food security, water governance, and other things. As we have seen India's relationship with China also, that they've gone a step back also vis-a-vis looking at their bigger picture. Um, can't this be something that compels both the countries to sit down and work on their strategic rivalry at this particular moment? Thank you, sir.
Third question.
Uh, Thank you so much. Very insightful from Professor John and Dr. Jaspal. My question would be first to Dr. Jaspal regarding, you mentioned that there is a profound transformation in the world order. You mentioned the Cold War, then the war on terror, which and the Pak nuclearization. You mentioned that there is a return of state-on-state war, right? So today, the U.S. president, he's in China. He met President Xi in Beijing, which was a very consequential meeting, and President Xi explicitly stated that the U.S. and China must avoid the Thucydides trap, which is an inevitable clash between a rising power and an existing power. So, does the transformation of the global order, the security architecture, uh, does it serve as a harbinger of war between the U.S. and China? Because they already have an issue regarding Taiwan. Since you mentioned that the return of state-on-state war, that's how I'm linking it to that. And a question to Professor Jean. Very lightly, you pointed out that narrative warfare has become quite pertinent between Pakistan and India. We saw it, we're still seeing it right now. You mentioned that Pakistan claimed irrefutable evidence being shared with the international community regarding India's involvement in supporting Fitat al-Kharij and Fitat al-Hindustan. So, and you also mentioned that it was not very well received. It was not very well showcased on the international media. The aspect of that was not available on the international media. So how could we support that? How could we as academics, as policy professionals, support the state's effort to highlight Indian support to the Fitat al-Kharij of Fitat al-Hindustan through a policy-based approach? How could we support the evidence being presented, and could a media strategy be devised for that? Thank you.
We'll have Dr. Jaspal going first and then followed by John.
Okay, thank you very much for very two important questions. When we look about conflict technology driven, that's correct. Uh, every war has or every era has impact. When we look about since the Civil War in United States, we'll start taking technology as an important dimension of the making of a strategy. Like today, we have started taking media as important. This war was or is or will in future, of course, we call it non-contact warfare. And that's why I gave the example that the future makers of the strategy will be going to base their entire discourse or discussions or anticipation or debate on one symmetrical war between India and Pakistan, equal power, firing, retaliating, escalating horizontally and vertically, and one in our neighborhood that is asymmetrical. And we are part of both. This is very important. In one, we were the actor, in the other, we are the mediator. So this is, of course, technological too. And but at the same time, we have to also keep in mind technology is not the decisive factor. People think that the technology is the decisive factor in the war or a warfare. They are wrong. It, it is a force multiplier. We have been discussing and many anti-Pak, like Kasifir in 2006, he was saying that Pakistan has a battle-hardened armed forces. We have a battle-hardened air force. So we have a far better, of course, we are in the war zone since 1979, but since 2001, we are fighting. We were living with this 1971 syndrome, but now we are living with the 2025 pleasant memory. So this is changes. But technology, of course, we cannot ignore. It's a technology driven, but only that state will be going to win the technology, use the technology, which is not lacking the doctrinal lag. And I think this is the best point when we look about. Now, coming towards your China point, yes, in Islamabad, I can give you also about prior to the 15th June 2020, when Gulwan happened, whenever I met the Chinese diplomat or whenever I was traveling in the US, somewhere I received this one message that you can give a chance to the economic cooperation and put your all the conflicts at the backside. Learn from us. Learn from us. I still recall that when the Gulwan happened, I sent a message to my Chinese friend and I said, "What do you think now?" And he said, "Oh, you are too dangerous, Professor, dangerous." But he agreed. And after that, I can just giving you exact primary source. Last year, I was in Tsinghua University. They had a closed door discussion in which there were Americans and others. And there was one Indian region who was teaching their Hindi, but part of that since 10, 15 years back. He said that whenever I sit in the car and they put that cassette in which they have a jokes about they're beaten by the Markaha. What was that? That is the Chinese started realizing, though President Xi says we will be having a world-class armed forces by 2049 or 2039, but he is very much clear. And in 2007, he said, if anyone crossed the limits in the South China Sea, they will be hitting the iron wall and their heads will be smashed. So Chinese practically, they are not interested. Their formula is not for a war. If you read their Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, Global Governance Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative, these are the four initiatives in the last 4 years on the basis the entire Chinese foreign or strategic policy is based. But they are not. Here comes, we make the Chinese. We now liberated the China after this May. If you see earlier, it was seen China, Sino-India, FPAC. Now, if you see the strategic literature, there you will find Indo-Pak, no more Sino-India. So hyphening, and it's a big soothing impact for the Chinese. And of course, we introduced their nuclear reactors when we had two nuclear reactor power plants in Karachi in 2003. The Chinese entered in the nuclear industry, civil industry with a big bang. Same with these missiles they entered. But chances is CBN. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and then Field Marshal both said we are ready for a dialogue. But the dialogue, you can say, if Prime Minister Modi come for a dialogue or his team, then he has a big cost. The cost is political. So it's difficult because he is now, like President Trump, he is now victim of the echo of his own saying, his own policy. He has militarized his politics in a manner that is difficult. So there will be a big shift that here. And now coming towards the Pakistan, the reality is that the current regime or the current armed forces chief, they received a lot of legitimacy after the Marka Haq. And it was very important because he fired Iran missiles and they were start behaving in 2024. He fired, you can strike Afghanistan, they decreased and they are behaving. But there is a different way we have to look at it. Still in Islamabad, there are many pro-Afghans, and I say, and this is a dilemma, sorry with General Saab saying this, that in Pakistani analysts, civil military bureaucrats dominate today. And when we look about these civil military bureaucrats, they were trained like these youngsters when there was a Cold War. They were at the peak of as a practitioner when there was the end of the Cold War and a war on terror. But the world has changed today. And like old habits, like old horses, they always go to their own old stables. It's difficult to change them. It's very difficult for me as a professor to change my thinking and move with the time. Time has changed. Bipolarity, unipolarity, multipolarity. And here comes the second question that you raised, sir, that when we look about this transformation, this just every time has its own. Golden was the same. If you see, on the one side, President Trump and you can say today, she are talking. What is this happening? They are now playing the games like in the Cold War, we have seen that if you have strategic competition, no economic coordination. But in the multipolarity or in current situation, even you have maintained a strategic competition, but you have to be very careful and cautious for your bigger objective. I think the world has moved like these three big powers, US, Russia, and China. They realize what we see in the concert of the Europe, that they are great powers at the not at the European level as we have studied as students, at the global level. And they have their own, they are the what we call it leviathans in their own regions. And everyone is cautious to interfere in their region. But they are contesting at a different level. For instance, Trump has moved to the Western Hemisphere and he left the Europe to the Putin. The bad luck of the Putin is, though the Japanese, French, and Germans and the French lost their strategic culture, which was based on the Marshall nations in the last 80 or 85 years. But now, historically, Napoleon invaded Russia, Hitler attacked. That what it reflects, that the French and the Germans had a capacity to face the Russia, and that's why what is the debate? This the German chancellor is saying French and British are together going to face a nuclear deterrence. A Eurocode debate started, which was in 1990, which was flushed out because the Americans and the NATO was there. Now they are talking about the European defense. It's entirely different. So it means one region, one great power challenges by the other. Same go for the China. When you look about the China, Taiwan's opposition leader visited there, and the Americans are not interfering as they used to be in Southeast Asia. And the Chinese model is not to conquer the Taiwan. They are still working on soft power. And now comes the Western Hemisphere, they didn't bother. America is there. So three great powers contest came in the Middle East. Chinese have a strategic partnership, 400 billion US dollars strategic partnership. But people think that the Chinese are relying on the Middle Eastern oil. No. They have more opportunity for Siberia. They are moving on a different track. They have a big reserves. It will be, and still some says that Venezuela oil is coming. And it's just a different debate. And this middle powers, middle power is India, middle power is Pakistan. They are going to play their role. So the world is great powers and the middle powers, and in that you have a push and pulls. So there the great powers can talk, like the kings talk, and the middle powers will be going to play a role as we are playing in the Middle Eastern sort of thing. And my final point here is for the analysts and my students. Some people say the United States, of course, we read it here, whatever we want to listen. America's oil industry is booming now because America is an oil exporting country. Yes, inner side 2 rupees gas, but today American oil is coming. Eurojets did not buy the American oil. They used to rely on the Middle Eastern oil. Now they are buying the American oil. America, since last 4 5 years, oil producing, petro producing, not petro consuming or importing, but exporting country. Whom is punishing with this blockade? People say, oh, Europeans, he's happy to punish the Europeans, happy to punish the Arab Gulf allies, happy to punish the Japanese, because Trump, with ego, he thinks, and if that they did not support me. And if they did not support me in the war with the blockade, let them to be start crying. So that's why no one is affecting. When we say the international community is going to influence the Trump behavior, they are failing to influence the behavior. This is the reality. So we have to look world with a different dimension in which we have to move ahead, you and I or the others, in which we were trained. It's a different worldview. Thank you. So 1 minute. This was two-sided trap. Yes. Two-sided trap is everywhere. Rising power versus declining power. But there is interesting. United States is struggling to sustain. China is not going for a military to gain. This is a very important point. In a two-sided trap, when it was theorized or based on that, Athenians and Sparta, they were always fighting. If you see the Chinese, even in the Gulwan, they realize they are not prepared for it. If anyone doing on a China research, it's a non-tested variable, but this is a hypothesis. China's one-child policy exposed them. China's economic prosperity make them to not accept a body bags. So that's why in the Gulwan, China did not even share how many casualties. And after the Gulwan, Chinese have entirely different thinking. Today, China cannot. That's why they have given up one-child policy. Because one soldier dying, 3 to 4 families are affected. Maybe one child with the 2 grandparents, 2 grandmothers, and then the margins. It's a very socialist or structural problem for the China. So China is not going to pose a challenge to the US. Americans are thinking because they are a realist paradigm and their military-industrial complex is there, which is building a lot of money. What is a big business? That is, so Americans have a different worldview. Chinese are saying, no, there is no two-sided trap because they are not prepared for it.
Yeah. Over to you, Don.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to answer first the second question before turning to the first one. I say I'll try because I have no answer, of course. How to support or to define a communication strategy for pushing the Pakistani reading of evidence of Indian support to TTP. Well, I think Pakistan is well equipped at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to provide whatever credible information is available. And, you know, spying in Balochistan is something, and we recall what has happened a few years ago. But the type of analysis encapsulated in the former Indian sponsor TTP, well, we need, if there is evidence, it should be more clearly put on the table. On the second question, on the first question, sorry, about targeting eventually societies. Of course, it's an important issue. But here again, we are a bit lost in the fog of a war of narratives. When India say we have targeted terrorist complex, the Pakistani answer is not at all. It was civilian, or it was a madrasa, or etc. On the other hand, particularly in this age of artificial intelligence, you cannot rely now, unfortunately, for instance, on photographs of which have been shot, for instance, because you don't know if the photograph has been manipulated by artificial intelligence or not. And that's true also when we have seen some photograph of a plane being shot or some element on the ground. So the world, effectively, I mean, I agree with Professor Jaspal. The world is changing, but this war of narratives is making the analysis more and more difficult, except if you choose clearly one side against the other. But of course, as you underline, it's a question from a social science point of view. So we are trying to be fair with the reality. But certainly, you know, we don't have a clear assessment of how many victims have been to be deplored. We have various data, but it's not always clear. So it's a point which deserves attention. But of course, as there is no external observer during or after the conflict, but once again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but once again, the war of narrative is so active that it's really difficult to provide what's supposed to be a clear analysis. I would like finally to comment a point made by Professor Jaspal when you said, Professor, that it's difficult to change one's thinking. And I do agree. I do agree. But I think as far as the big change of global geopolitics, that it's not so difficult to change one's thinking, because here you see a certain number of events, of declaration, of reasonable comments, but it's more difficult to change one's thinking, not at the global geopolitical level or how multilateralism is changing, etc. When we turn back to the issue of Pakistan-Indian relationship, because here it's not just how the two countries are locating themselves in the changing global context, as long as citizens of two countries with no cultivated trust between each of them, the ideological and the political history of each side remain very strong. And so, in a way, to change one thinking may happen at two levels. The very global level, where it's more easy to adjust with a moving reality, and the regional level, or the purely bilateral level, where, of course, the legacy of the past is very important for both sides. So let us remain optimistic about the goal of this conference on resurrecting dialogue and maintaining strategic stability. But optimism is rather a matter of faith than an evident conclusion. Thank you.
With the permission of the two speakers and our discussant, we are turning close to concluding this particular session. And first of all, I'm really grateful to Ambassador Azaz, Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, who took time out and, as we were discussing, broke the paradigm for speakers to come to Lahore and speak rather than speakers from Lahore to go to Islamabad and speak. So thank you very much for joining us today. And it is your old home, Formunite, you are, and you, and I hope the trip around the campus in the morning was good to bring back old memories, and we'll continue to self and your opportunity to have you around more of it. Thank you to Jean-Luc Racine for taking time out uh, on a busy schedule and being able to speak to us, remain with us throughout the uh, time of the seminar and answer very candidly the questions, and also giving us the most importantly the third party or outside view to understand what is we are talking about and what other people are thinking about us when we talk about India and Pakistan. So thank you very much, merci beaucoup,
Merci.
and for your time. Uh, there are a couple of things that had come up. I think it is you have heard the perspective from Dr. Jaspal, who is an expert on deterrence matters and nuclear paradigm itself, and he's written books on that. And we had the opportunity of interacting a number of times and seen him speak on these issues. But I wanted to share a few things for you with you from the perspective of my perspective. That would be how the military thinks or the army thinks in matters ways that it is. So on the matter of change, how quick the institutions are to change. The bigger the institution, the harder it is to change. And army is a very big institution. It works. It works on doctrines. It develops doctrines, tests them in the field experiences, and then perfects them over a period of time, keeps an eye on the enemy, and then the doctrines that are formulated over time, along with the contingencies, they get applied when the actual time for operations comes. I'm in the context of time, just picture this with me and remain on this, on the timeline part of it, not what I am saying in terms of my role. Uh, in 1980, as a young officer, I was 76, I was a young officer. We were looking at being trained to fight India in a conventional war, purely with conventional weapons in a Cold War context. 1998, Pakistan and India went on and the region became nuclear. And 2002, I was heading the army panel to re-review the changing nature and character of war, which of course was then the final recommendations presented in the Indian DU setting to the General Musharraf, who was the president and the army chief. And there are a number of changes that we incorporated based on those recommendations in the armed forces. The issue now was whether there is space for war or no space for war. And it was in this context that the things changed. The Indians came back in between. You talked of, we concluded that there is no space for war and we went about some things to do. The Indians came back to create a space for war, and we had the doctrine of Cold War, a cold start, which became proactive operations and things like that. So they were trying to tell you that no, there is space for war. Pakistan responded by its doctrine of spectrum deterrence and closed that gap and said there is no space for war. Today, technology is again opening up and saying that is there a space for war or no space for war? That is the question which has been put to you. Dr. Zafar has pointed out the indicators where it is going. But again, reverting to what I said, that in 2002, I had the privilege of heading that panel to see that what has changed. Coming back to 2000, we have that interim in Afghanistan where we are looking at non-state actors fighting us and we fighting them. But in the larger scale, comes back 2010 and 11. There is a different requirement, and I had the privilege to formulate a new course for the senior officers to train them in a third stage of changing warfare and nature of changing warfare. It was national security and war course that you remember. I had to do so as a very compressed time frame, and that is course which continues till today to train our senior officers at that level of strategy and operational strategy, how to work out and how to implement. Fast forward now, 2020, yeah. We have a Ukraine-Russia war, and I was the ambassador over there when this happened. First priority was to evacuate our own people safely, which we did, 5,000 in number. But thereafter, when I stayed over there, we looked at how technology had impacted that war. From a stage where the Ukrainians were dependent on all missions which came to them from US and from with limitations, severe limitations on where to what ways the targets could be chosen, the ranges to which the weapons could be used, and their hands were tied in numerous ways. So that is what the war started with. The fought back hard, and they were able to contain Russia in despite its all power on the eastern fringes of Ukraine. But the Ukrainians learned the lesson. They saw that the technology is the one which is coming to fore, and it is technology which will dominate. And Dr. Zafar has very rightly pointed out That technology is taking us and gravitating the warfare, which you talked of, Rabia, because that gravitation brings war closer to you. Previously, it was somewhere in Kashmir where I was commanding a division. You did not know about it because it was 700 kilometers away. You hardly get a news what is happening over there. But now it comes closer to you. It comes at home. So the Ukrainians saw this and they knew that we have our hands tied, and if we want to win this war, we will have to be smart enough to develop our own technologies. So they went on exclusively to indigenously develop the technologies in terms of drones, UAVs, and seeing them operate and see them what the effect they are creating. And secondly, on submarines, which are the again unmanned submarines or ships that they are talking of, and also uh, unmanned small tanks that we have seen operating. And we have seen them operating that they have mastered the technology to such an extent, then the operational depths, largely the logistics is being done by unmanned drones and unmanned uh, like, facilities that they have created. And the change marked the change of technology taking over warfare marked a turning point silently last week or last month, during the last month. You may not have noticed that, but since I've been my affinity was there to being exposed to that area. So Ukraine, for the first time, captured an Russian post, a very important post, without using human beings. It was a complete, a coordinated operation from UAVs in the air, ground unmanned vehicles which we were using, and also the logistics that were supporting this operation. And they captured this post because they are also short on manpower. So they did that. The technology has completely taken over. They were emboldened. They had tested that earlier, and they were doing it at number of places. So net result today in the first 6 months, we got is that Russia on the net has lost more territory than it has gained previous year. For one, it is marginal at this point in time, but it has lost more territory than it had gained previous year. So these are the facts that are silently happening on the ground. So you might like to do it. So will be ultimately, Dr. Zafar says, to a non-contact war. Yes, that is what I have demonstrated a non-contact warfare where one side was non-contact, the other side was human beings. So it was partially non-contact, not completely non-contact, but it was what has happened over there. And it is going to grow now that this has happened. And Ukrainians are, of course, using their missile technology, which Dr. Sabar pointed out, to such an accuracy that they are hitting everywhere where there is a refinery and the nodal points in refinery, we are hitting Russian refineries so as to the extent that Russian output has fallen again last 2 months from the previous year's numbers that they had in terms of supply sale of oil, and that is what the Russian supply line is oil sale of oil everywhere around the world. So technology, yes, it is going to make a lot of difference. But mark the Ukrainian example. Ukrainian fought with their hands tied. They developed their own technology. We are celebrating Marka Baka, but they were not our technologies. We had not indigenously developed them. And in Iran, US and Israelis have run out of missiles. It is hard to produce missiles when you are a long war. We have a certain number of, it is our indigenous capability. And that is the plus point. And how much we can further increase the number rapidly in a short war, in a short contact, which becomes longer over a period of time, will be the test of our logistics in future that we will have to look in these aspects and we talk of. So a non-contact is something that, so that is what I'm talking of. So technologies, yes, new technologies, AI driven, everything, but indigenous with the capability of being able to manufacture at home when you are in a state of war. And that's what the Iranians have demonstrated, that yes, they can, having suffered the losses, they can manufacture that, come back and be ready to for a second round, which the other side is now shying away because they don't have the missiles to fight or the weapons to fight on this side. Um, Pakistan-India relations, taking John Cook's what he's explained to us and what Dr. Jafar explained also. After Marka last year, 2025, Marka Haq, he had given you a picture of how quickly Indians changed their posture when it came to China. How quickly Modi accepted the and signed a agreement on the border to border management, where it was not doing so for many years. We quickly met the Chinese counterparts in different arenas, and then finally went to China, went to Peking, Beijing himself. And then, of course, you see that the economic and other political reasons are there. So, at one end, India has been from 1962 onwards being portraying China as the number one or one of the bigger enemies in the region that they have. If not number one is Pakistan, then number two would be India, China, and there. But they were willing to open up, or as they say in Europe, to bend the knee to China, open up the possibilities of a dialogue and open up the possibilities of negotiations to improve their economy. And are we willing to do so? This is a question which can be framed in a different way. That are we willing to think out of the box, out of the paradigm to re-engage? Because otherwise, what Dr. Ambassador Azaz pointed out to you was that as far as India is concerned, they are willing to live in South Asia without contact with Pakistan. So they're not interested in a dialogue. We continuously say that we are interested in a dialogue, but then we have to take on other steps to open up the windows for a dialogue. That will take a lot of courage to do it. If Modi, if you want to defeat Modi and take off that political capital from him, Dr. Zafar, I think a dialogue with Pakistan, India will rob him of all of the opportunities and all the politics that he's. And if you look at 2029, we bend our knee at this point in time and open up this dialogue with him and take away that thing from politically from him. That is one of the possibilities that can happen. Not that I'm suggesting that it will happen for sure, but this is how politics of the game where politics is played. You look at distant objectives, you look at what can take his voting power away and how you can impact him in 2029 when it comes by. But then it will also have a political cost in Pakistan. It will also have a lot of, and what happens lastly, I would end up over here, is that what happens in the countries, as Dr. Zafar very rightly pointed out, is that the nations, the leadership, they get into a bind that they becomes prisoners of their own rhetoric. That is the biggest challenge that happens to any nation, and that's a curse that happens to it. So, in order to what Dr. Jean-Luc said, that both sides are programmed, we have to show that we have won. Irrespective of what is the fact on ground, the perception the media has to create that both we have won. The Indians are saying that Sandur was successful, we have won. Today we are saying that yes, Marka Daga, we proved out on ground. Indians are saying no, we did not ask for mediation, but out of the three parties, two are saying that yes, there was a mediation, then the third one is of course lying. So the world sees that also, and we'll see this particular aspect as well. So this is something which is important for us to understand. Yesterday there was a question on what somebody asked about. You asked about that in terms of Israel and accepting Israel, but still not accepting Israel, but still talking to them or something like that. This is a classic case of where we as a nation are prisoner of our own rhetoric. We are not able to see rationally. We have developed so much of propaganda internally and perceptions internally that it is very hard for anybody now to sell a counter narrative. And I am afraid that we are building the same for Afghanistan also at this stage of time, which will become our own prisoners, because if we want to disarm India, we can't fight on two fronts. That is a simple thing. So even if you have to give something away, that don't build that rhetoric so that you are in a position to give other side a bridge to cross. So that is very, very important in diplomatic terms. That if the other side has a bridge to cross, we will always be willing to come and open a dialogue. So that is the final message that Mike, we can, in terms of political policy, in terms of public policy, offer to you for consideration is that be careful before you become yourself or you sell rhetorics which become makes others also a prisoner of rhetoric. So please join me in thanking our very worthy participants very worthy speakers and joining us today and enlightening us on the subject. Thank you very much. I will also, you want to say something, I'll leave it to you, because that is also important. But before that, I'll just ask you and request you to join me in giving a big hand to the speakers for the day. We have, because this is a student-centric thing, so a few words from her, and then I will present souvenirs to our participants.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Tahneen. So it's not working. It's not working. Okay now. My name is Tahreen Fatma, and I'm a student of MPhil at CPPG. As Dr. Noel brilliantly concluded our conference on bilateral relations and internal resilience, focus on India and domestic dynamics, I would like to extend sincere gratitude to everyone who made today's discussion insightful and meaningful. Throughout this conference, we explored how bilateral relations are not shaped solely by diplomacy and foreign policy, but are also deeply influenced by internal political stability, economic strength, social cohesion, and public sentiment. It becomes evident that domestic dynamics play a critical role in determining the direction and sustainability of international relations. Ambassador Izaz Chaudhry identified the changes of dynamics between India and Pakistan in light of recent events and the need to have a confidence building measures and bilateral connections for peaceful coexistence. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal shed a light on changing international political order, nuclear deterrence, geoeconomics of the region, and significance of narrative building, and how perhaps the world is increasingly becoming Hobbesian, where a strong military muscle can ensure a stable economy and political stage of a country, and dialogue should stay open. And last, I'd especially like to appreciate our speakers and participants whose perspectives enrich this conversation and encourage us to think beyond headlines and conventional narratives. Thank you all.
Yeah, now I would request Dr. Noel to present souvenirs to our panelists present here in person, Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. And after this, we'll move in front of E Block for a group photo. So I request everyone in the room to please gather around in front of E Block, and then we move to 021 for lunch. Thank you.